Hi gang, this is an update on the planning and the work that I have been doing throughout my sabbatical and since my sabbatical to pull together how Creating the Future is going to actually accomplish its mission. So hang on tight. I've got a couple of things that I want to bring you through because there were some ahas that I had on my sabbatical that I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys. The major one is that when I was thinking about getting partners together so that we could, quote, do planning, we know from all of the work that we have done with the continuum on brain science that we tend to shorthand in our brains. And so when I was saying planning, I was thinking something different than what some of you, perhaps, many people who might be watching this might be thinking about planning. So what I wanted to do here is I wanted to really take you inside as much as I can my head, which is a scary place, I know, and take you along to what I'm really thinking about when I'm talking about pulling together what it's going to take to accomplish our mission, part of which is having a plan in place. What you're going to see on the slide in front of you is the process that Creating the Future teaches, whether we're doing workshops, whether we are doing immersion courses, whenever we're teaching about program development. This is a flow chart of the process that we teach. We start, of course, with the vision, with the purpose, with the why. But immediately after that, we go into, okay, who else cares about this? So that we're sure that we are embedding community and bringing everybody together that has a stake in the outcome of what we're thinking of doing. From there, we create and resource everything together, which means that we plan together. Everybody that cares about this thing plans together. You guys may remember the story that we told in the Pollyanna Principles and that we tell everywhere we're teaching about our building the diaper bank in the Phoenix area, where we did our on-the-ground sleuthing and our asking of questions and asking who cares about this for a year before we started bringing people together, and they co-created the plan for creating the diaper bank. Out of that plan, then we go into program design mode. Any high level plan like we're about to do, the next step is really going to be design mode. You're not usually, unless you're doing a very, very micro planning, business planning, you're not going into actual implementation immediately. You leave on Sunday, you're not going into implementation on Monday. On Monday, you're going into design mode. And so you're designing it together. And from there, you are then implementing together. First, by identifying the resources that everybody has to bring to the table. And this board has talked so much about how we identify resources beyond just money. And we co-implement, we co-monitor, we co-adjust. And in that way, we're building something that's not just our organization's program, but everybody's program so that we're all accomplishing the mission together. Moving on to the next slide, though, what you see here is, I don't know, we can call it the normal way, the old way. What typically happens in organizations is we build our own programs and our own plans. So whether it is that somebody had an idea and we go into planning off of that idea, or whether it is actually a full-blown strategic plan, the organization does the planning. They may invite one or two key, what they'll call stakeholders, but mostly it is the organization doing a plan. The organization from that plan then goes out and does its homework, does its research. From that research, they figure out what the budget is going to be. They may do a focus group, so they may bring people in to advise them, but again, it's the organization's program. The organization goes out and finds the money, and the organization implements the program, monitors the program, adjusts the program, but the organization owns that program. The more I started to write about this process that we're going through over my sabbatical, and the more I started to reach out to engage partners in working together at that very, very beginning stage, finding who else cares about this, the more I started to realize that, especially in this sector, but I think that it's a pretty common thing, there is a tendency to have an almost veneration of planning. It becomes looking at planning as an ends rather than a means. And while most of us would intuitively say, no, 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 we know planning is a means, what we really tend to do, especially in the, and I use nonprofit in a very intentional way here, in the money is scarce sector, in the community benefit sector, is we tend to really have a myopic focus on the planning, and that becomes an ends unto itself. The slide that's coming up shows you what I'm talking about. When an organization decides it's time to do planning, the first thing they say is, well, where are we going to get the funds to do the plan? So we start looking for funding for creating a plan. So, oh, good, we've got a funder that'll give us $5,000 or $10,000 to do a plan. And so that's when we gather the board together and we say, okay, we need to find dates together for the plan. And then we sort of, sometimes you hear it jokingly called planning to plan. We look at the logistics. We've got to find a site. We've got to find a caterer. We've got to find all of the different logistics if people are going to travel, etc. There may be homework involved. There may be needs assessments that people do, all of the things that we do in preparation for the plan. We go out and we find a facilitator for the plan, and then we spend 2 days together planning. After the plan is done, we come back to the office and we find that just as there was on Friday before we left for the plan, on Monday, there's still no funding for the implementation or the design of that implementation. There's still no staff to go out and find that funding for all of the cool things that we came up with in the plan, and there's absolutely no time. So 1 year after the plan is done, we come back and we say, okay, what did we accomplish out of this plan? And what we find is that, well, we didn't have the staff, we didn't have the time, we really couldn't go into anything new, but we already had these 2 programs in the pipeline and we were already starting to talk to funders about that. So we've done those programs and they're up and running and they're great. Or the board identified something that was absolutely on fire during their planning session, and that's what happened. But the result of our planning, when we are focused on the planning, is that very little actually gets implemented because we're not putting the pieces in place that we know we're going to need to get to work on Monday. So now let's look at what's really going on here. As I mentioned, the results of any high-level plan like we're about to do are that the very next thing we're going to do is go into design mode for the programs that we decided came out of that planning. What we frequently hear is, well, we can't fund all of the things that we're going to need on Monday. When we ask groups why nothing has been accomplished and why they didn't have the pieces in place, they all pretty much say the same thing. Well, we couldn't know on Monday what we were going to need until we did our planning on Saturday and Sunday. And what we found is that's actually not true. We know that what's going to come out of a high-level plan like the one that we're about to do is we're going to go into design mode. And when we go into design mode, we know that there are certain functions that are absolutely going to be needed to get us from design into implementation. You'll see those on the screen right here. We know we're going to need a project manager, somebody who's going to spearhead the project. If there are more than one project, we're going to need a project manager who's really good at juggling a lot of projects. They may need an additional person who is an operations or logistics coordinator, depending on how complex everything is. We know we're going to need somebody to coordinate the deep engagement that's going to be needed to make sure that everybody is participating who's going to be affected by this thing that we're thinking about doing. And probably all of those people are going to need an assistant to keep everything in line and to make sure that everything is calendared, to arrange appointments, to handle phone calls, and etc. We know that those are the things that we're going to need. We know that whatever we're going to have to design, we're going to need that. And we know that without those, we see what happens all the time, is that nothing happens because we didn't have anybody to do the work. When I talked with Aaron Hurst, who wrote The Purpose Economy, he was my final podcast last month, he had this to say about the situation.
These organizations hired functional talent like marketing, technology, HR, strategy ahead of the need, not after they needed it. And then they're able to grow into it. And I realized, I had this aha moment of realizing, nonprofits don't have that luxury. What's happening is they can, if ever, afford that talent 5 years after they need it, not 5 years before.
So here's what we now have the opportunity to do and what the results potentially could be. We have the opportunity to design, model, and show results of what an effective process is for not just planning, but accomplishing the mission. because we don't just want a plan, we want to accomplish our mission. And that will mean gathering the people who also care about what we care about, co-creating a plan and co-resourcing the design of that before we go into planning, not after. Are sitting together and doing the planning, and whether that means that we're all in the same room together, or whether it means that we do whatever we can to make sure that there is global participation in our plan. It means co-designing, it means identifying resources together, it means all of that. We have the opportunity to model what that looks like and to explore, to see what will happen. The results of that will be demonstrating and exploring all of what is possible. How can we be accountable for ends versus just means? Deeply engaging people so that it really is a shared process and a collective process, not just among organizations, not just among funders, but among anybody whose work is going to be affected by what we're doing. We'll also be able to demonstrate by the fact that we are engaging everybody, including funders and social investors, in a different kind of relationship, the kinds of relationships that we've talked about all along, the way we want to see funding happen, where it's not just funding, but resourcing at every level. And all of the other things that you see on the screen, plus so much more, and all of the internal benefits that we know happen when a board is engaged in a planning process. And we'll have a plan, and we'll be taking steps to accomplish the mission. What this means our opportunity is, as the meta capacity builders that Creating the Future really is we have the ability right now, the opportunity right now to co-create, co-explore, co-demonstrate a process that can completely realign the field of capacity building, so that we really are talking about looking at people's and communities' ability to build their own capacity to create their own lives, to create the life that they want in their communities. We'll do this not only by the type of planning we do, which is going to be the kind of planning that we do here, which is causality based, but we'll do it by bringing everybody in to plan together whom we want to influence. They'll already be in the room and creating the influence that we want to create. We'll actually be accomplishing the mission in the very way that we do this work. But the results, if we just aim at doing a plan, is yes, we will absolutely have a plan. And yes, there will be more internal engagement within Creating the Future. Absolutely. All of those results that come out of normal planning will absolutely be in place. But we will still have no means to implement that plan, and we'll be right back where we started from. So here's what we're seeing is next. We are in the process right now of preparing to engage, that second box in this flowchart here. I've got a few more posts to write, including one that's based on this video. And from there, we're going to dive in, and we means all of us as board members, as community members, listing people that we want our mission to influence. When we talk about accomplishing our mission, we talk about changing the way everybody is asking questions throughout the field of whoever is looking to change the world, from consultants in the community benefit sector to corporate leaders to small business owners. And so what we're looking at is engaging people in that conversation. So listing the people that we want, not just groups, because we know the groups, but listing the people that we want to start contacting in our sleuthing. Primarily, those are going to be the folks who are driving the systems that create change. So consultants who teach those systems, and academics who teach those systems, whether that's in the for-profit or the community benefit world. Funders who promote those systems. We've seen funders have so much influence over the logic model movement and measurement movement, the collective impact movement, the run like a business movement. Funders absolutely need to be engaged in changing the questions that we're all asking so that we can actually change the world. From there, we'll be gathering the resources to ensure that the infrastructure is ready, and then we will plan with whoever can plan with us. But that's just part one of what's next, because part two of what's next is we're going to keep doing work in the meantime. So when you look on the screen at the 4 pillars of our mission, we've often said that in part we already have a plan, and in part we need a plan. What I realized over my sabbatical is that what we have a plan for very solidly is the last item you see on the screen, our education the education part of our mission. What we don't have is a plan for the rest of it. We don't really know what we want to research, what we want to develop, what we want to experiment with. We don't really know what we want to demonstrate. We don't really know what we want to convene around. And so we've been taking things as they come down the pike and saying, well, this is a demonstration project because they're all really interesting. But we really have only got a real solid plan for our education mission. That plan is to provide educational opportunities for every group that we want to influence, from funders and foundations to corporate leaders to consultants and everyone along the way, at every stage along the continuum of potential. So what we're looking to do over the course of next year, as we're doing all of the rest of this work in not only preparing to plan, but preparing to design how we're going to accomplish our mission, is we intend to have a full complement of educational programs for at least one of those audiences, for consultants at every stage along the continuum of potential. Our goal by the end of 2015 is that we have a full complement of programs for consultants to community benefit organizations at every stage along the continuum of potential. And as Gail has pointed out when I shared this with her, if we do that, as we've known pretty much instinctively all along, we're going to have the revenue to continue doing our work. One of the things that's been exciting to us from a long time ago when we started to look at having educational programs for all of these audiences at every point along the continuum is that, yes, we'll need an infusion of resources in order to boost the startup of this effort, but that we will have continual resources coming in through those education programs once they get going, if we've got something for everybody at every stage along the continuum. I want to apologize to you guys. The photo that you see on the screen is from the cover of a book that we talk about a lot in the immersion course called The Usual Error. And the usual error is that I think you're thinking what I'm thinking. And so I apologize for the fact that this was all kind of going on in my head, and I'm not sure that this depth of thinking about planning was going on in your heads. So I hope that you guys have a good, solid sense of where we're going. We are just really, really excited, and the next big piece of this effort is for all of us to come up with names of people that we want to start engaging in this process, so that a year from now, we not only have a plan for accomplishing our mission, but we are solidly into design mode because we've got the infrastructure in place to design the implementation of programs that will accomplish our mission in the 10 years that we've given ourselves. So I hope that's helpful for you guys. And if you've got questions, I am sure I will hear them. Thanks a lot, guys.